Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter, where I'm also called @Movies TV Mad. Instagram and TikTok, where it's a little bit different, @Movies TV Mad 555. So welcome. So yes, I've made the gigantic decision to rewatch episode 1, which is called Pilot of Smallville, to episode finale, which is the final ever episode of Smallville, the series finale. Just this moment, I just finished re-watching Pilot, the first ever episode of Smallville. Now listen, my eyes are still wet from crying. Smallville is such an emotional show for me. I think it's my favourite, DC live action franchise because it was so consistent. It went the distance in every way. Everything's set up, or most of the things set up, not Jonathan and Lana's aunt Nell, that kind of thing that was going to happen. That wasn't forget about that. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about that. But apart from that, everything they set up in the pilot, literally they went ahead and developed it and they executed it so well. But listen, for me, Smallville is very, very special. So the pilot episode, wow. I love the beginning, how we're in space and we can see Clark's ship heading for Earth. But also we can see the kryptonite meteor shower following him behind. So it's pretty awesome. Then we're in the Smallville town centre where we see the whole big banner, Go Crows. It's a big match at the Smallville Crows football team. And we meet Jonathan and Martha Kent. So they go into Nell's shop, who's Lana's aunt. Lana Lang, who of course is Clark Kent's childhood sweetheart. So anyway, Martha and Nell have this bit of banter. Nell doesn't like Martha because Nell used to date Jonathan. So, Martha says, look, we're here to get some flowers. And she says, what flower? I can't remember. What is it, a daffodil? And she goes, yeah, they are very uncomplicated flowers, which I always find so hilarious. It's great. These two hate each other, but this is something from the pilot they never went along with, which is a shame because it would have been kind of a subplot, which would have been kind of interesting. But you can't do them all, can you? As I know as a writer. So, anyway, little Lana, she must be about 5 or 6 or whatever she was. She's sitting there and she's dressed as a princess. So Martha says, what kind of princess you are? I'm a fairy princess. Let me grant you a wish. So we know that Martha's wishing to have a child. Martha can't conceive children, as we know from the comics. So she does a little wand, little Lana, and then Martha makes a wish. And then they get into the van, they get into the truck, and Jonathan says, I know what you wish for. It's all I've ever wished for, Martha said. Imagine that. A woman who can't conceive a child, that's all she wants in the world, and she's got all this love to give. They both have as parents. It's beautiful. Really, the moral of the pilot episode, the commentary is on bullying, self-blame, and self-sacrifice. And really discovering that your life isn't what you thought it was. At the beginning of this, Clark knows he's fast. Clark knows he's got powers to a point, but maybe he thinks he's a meteor freak. I'm not sure about that. We're going to the meteor freak thing a little bit later on. So all of a sudden, we meet Lex and Lionel Luthor. They're on the helicopter, and we get this really cool DC Comics Easter egg about the Queens dying in how did they die? They died in a boat crash, right? Or something like that. That's how Smallville Law did it. A little bit different in the comics anyway. So basically, which is a very important Easter egg for the show as well, by the way, and what happens there. So yeah, Lionel Luthor, who's basically we've never had ever pre-Smallville. So we didn't have any knowledge of Lex Luthor's father. So anyway, if you notice in DC Law, you've got LL Lex Luthor, LL Lana Lang, and CK Clark Kent, kind of sounding the same. So Lionel Luthor was very clever, LL, just like Lex Luthor, right? So that was pretty awesome. So anyway, he puts the paper down and he tells Lex to stop shutting his eyes. Lex is scared of being on the helicopter. Luthor's are not afraid, son. You have a destiny. So their relationship is already displayed. Lionel's trying to give the tough love, and Lex is being messed up already by this. So we get this whole thing where Lionel is buying some land off the Ross brothers, and the Ross brothers are obviously related to young Pete Ross, who Clark's best friends with, which we find out later on in the episode. Anyway, the meteor shower begins. Listen, the budget for this Smallville pilot at the time was record-breaking. Only the Lost pilot cost more money to make. And the meteor shower still looks fantastic. Unfortunately, the DVD I have for season 1, it's just kind of adapted from VHS, so the picture isn't as great as we're used to, but it's still amazing. The meteors coming down are fantastic. It's bombing the town centre. It's sensational. And then we see Lana Lang's parents die. Now, it's a bit dumb how they did this, and it's not like David Nutter, the director, who directed many episodes of DC pilots and many episodes of X-Files, including the X-Files pilot. They're just standing there looking at this meteor coming down, and don't you think you should move? Anyway, that never happened, did it? And it's an in-house joke for all Smallville fans. Anyway, it's really cool. So it's not cool. You see them die, basically. The meteors hit them, and you see the young actress, right, because she's not Christine Krug at this point. She's crying. She's seen her parents killed by this meteor, and you just look at her face and your heart breaks for her. It's such a great moment. So anyway, Martha and Jonathan are in their truck, and the meteors are coming down either side of them. It's so cool. Again, the special effects are sensational. They crash into the smoke of the meteors. You don't actually see the car crash, but it's done pretty cool. So they're upside down, and I know Schneider and O'Toole, who played Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent, actually had to be upside down in this truck, and they hated it, understandably. So they see Clark, and she picks Clark up, and Jonathan can see that she wants to keep the child. So this is the baby Kal-El. He's just crashed down in the spaceship. They found him, and Jonathan goes, "We can't keep him, Martha. He has parents." Where? I don't think they can't be anywhere around here. And then they see this crashed spaceship, and then Clark goes, "What are we going to say? We found him in a field." And Martha says, and these are great lines, by the way, Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, who created and wrote the pilot, and wrote a lot of episodes from the first 4 seasons. Well, the final episode they ever wrote was episode 2, season 4, if I remember rightly. I know a lot about Smallville, by the way. So these guys are pioneers. So anyway, Martha goes, "We didn't find him. He found us." So anyway, there's a lot more to this pre-teenage Clark Kent story, as we see at the beginning of this pilot. But that we won't see what happens next until a flashback in season 2. So we skip many years later, I think 12 years later. Yeah, 12 years later. So Clark Kent's a teenager and played by Sir Tom Welling. He's not officially a Sir, but I'm going to call him Sir Tom Welling. So he plays Clark Kent, and Clark's researching on the internet about people with special abilities, how this kid lifted up a truck, blah, blah, blah. He wants to know how he's got these abilities. Anyway, so he goes downstairs, he's called by Martha, and then Jonathan says to him, "What's that? What's that slip?" And he goes, "Well, I want your permission to play in the football team." Then Jonathan goes, "Well, you can't. This is a thing. Clark is being punished for having these gifts. Jonathan's afraid that he'll hurt the other kids." Understandably. So this was a really good piece of commentary as well. You can't play football because of your abilities. It's like if you're a little bit weak as a child, or you've got asthma, they don't want you playing sports, but for you, it's so unfair. So many great themes here. It's fantastic. Anyway, Jonathan says, "Look, I'm sorry. I know this must be hard for you." He goes, "All I want to do is be, a normal kid. I don't want to be some loser," or something along those lines. I'm just paraphrasing here. And it's as I say, it's very interesting because being normal is the most important thing to a teenager. They want to fit in, because I can tell you from being a weirdo now and a weirdo at school, if you're weird, if you're different, you don't fit in, you don't have any friends. I didn't have any friends at school. Now, of course, that won't surprise you. I've got friends now, but I didn't have any friends back then. So, because I was weird, because I was different. Now, Clark has got friends. As he runs to get the school bus, he misses it. So he uses it in a brilliant sequence. He uses his super speed to get to school. We meet his 2 best friends, Chloe Sullivan, played by the talented Alison Mack. Forget about anything else, but the talented Alison Mack in terms of performance and art and acting. And Sam Jones, the third place, is his friend Pete Ross, related to the Ross brothers. I think obviously one of them's his father, one of them's his uncle. Anyway, they sold the cream corn factory to Lionel Luthor, and he turned it into a plant. Anyway, not a plant that you grow, a plant. I don't. They basically they make crops and shit. Whatever they do, it's not important. Anyway, so they're his best friends. And what happens is Pete has a bet with Chloe. What is it? That he's going to be late for school and miss the bus, so Chloe has to pay up. So this is an ongoing theme. So anyway, they get off the bus and Chloe goes to Clark. How did you get to school so fast? And then we find out through Pete that Chloe is obsessed. You know, she thinks she's like Scooby-Doo in the Mystery Machine. They use these terms because she always thinks her weirdar is always up here. She's always suspicious of everything. And then she reveals, well, it's not my fault. All these weird things happen in this leafy little hamlet. Another great line by Alan Miles. And anyway, then Pete says to Clark, are you going to join the football team? And Clark says, I don't think that's a good idea because obviously he's not allowed. His father didn't sign the permission slip. Anyway, this is a great moment of Smallville history when Clark looks over there and he sees Lana Lang, played by the beautiful, effervescent Christine Crook. And I tell you what, her performance is so good in this episode. I fell in love with her. She's great. She's such a good actor. And, you know, she was very, very, you know, everyone was raw in this pilot. There was not much acting experience. Obviously, Annette O'Toole, John Glover, Michael Rosenbaum had done a bit, but everyone was very, very fresh and, you know, raw, should I say. But yeah, I think Christine did amazingly. I'm still so respectful of what she did because this is a country girl. She's got to be pure, and she's got to, you know, even if you're not pure in real life, you've got to play it pure. So you don't believe that she's anything but pure. Now, she's already got a boyfriend called Whitney. Now, Whitney really is based up like the character Brad in Superman the movie when he tells Clark he has to clean up before he goes home, and then Clark kicks the football up into the stratosphere and runs after the train. So he's a very similar character. And so Clark's got a crush on Lana, obviously, but she's unattainable. I like this commentary as well because how many of us, it doesn't matter how you identify, when you're at school, if you're at school now, you have a crush on someone that you can't have. The most fanciful person in school or at work. I've had so many crushes like that in my young life. I'm not young anymore. I know that. I'm not being deluded. So, Clark's got this crush, but Lana is wearing a kryptonite necklace. It's made from a piece of the meteor, from a piece of the kryptonite that killed her parents. Now, they don't know the meteor's a kryptonite. They don't know it's called that. So they just call them meteor rocks or something like that. Clark won't find out it's called kryptonite until season 2. And we'll get to that episode called Rosetta, a very special episode, when we get there and we can talk about it fully like we're doing about the pilot. So, yeah, so that makes it worse because he falls over when he gets near her because the kryptonite is making him weak. And then he drops this Nietzsche book, and it's about Nietzsche used to write about the Superman. It's not the Superman from the comics, but the Superman who has the ultimate power. So she picks up the book and she says, what are you, Clark? Man or Superman? Of course, this is fucking brilliant because obviously he's going to become Superman. And Smallville and Alan Miles did a lot of this in the writing, and I think it's beautiful. He goes, I haven't quite figured it out yet. And then she goes, or before that, she says, I didn't know you had a dark side, Clark. And he goes, well, doesn't everybody? Another great kind of a piece of commentary and writing. So anyway, I think I've missed a bit out from the start of the pilot. So when Lex Luthor, oh, yes, I have. Let's go back. How could I forget this bit? So when Lex is with Lionel at the start, when Lionel's selling or buying the field from the what's his name? Sam Jones's character, Pete Ross. When he's buying the land from the Rosses, Lex is just in the field messing about when the meteors land. So what happens is Lionel discovers that the meteors have hit around Lex and made him bald. He's now bald for life. Now this is a great moment because this is the moment that Lex Luthor, the Lex Luthor that we know, has been bald. He's bald because of the meteors. Now, in the films, it's never really explained. Superman the movie, it's not explained why Lex is bald. In other iterations, It's never explained. Now, in the 1960 Superboy comic, there's an issue where Lex Luthor comes to Smallville and he admires and looks up to Clark or Superboy, and then he gets jealous of him. He does a chemical experiment, it explodes, and he becomes bald. So Al Miles obviously read this comic and took an element of that from it. I think it's great. And obviously he becomes bitter and twisted with his jealousy of Superboy. That would happen down the road. So, yeah, he's bald because of the meteors, and I think that's great, because after we see this bit, we see his father Lionel look at him with disgust, and this is going to sum up their whole relationship from this moment till his final appearance, John Glover's final appearance as Lionel Luthor in the episode Descent of Season 7, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So then we go back to the Kents finding Clark, and I think this is great. From that disgust in Lionel's face, we go to these salt of the earth couple, finding an abandoned child, finding a child who's orphaned, and bringing them into their homes, so bringing him into their home. And I think that's just great. It just shows you that messed up dynamic between Lionel and Lex, and you're going to see a lot more of that as the series progresses. And then you see the loving home of the Kents. This is what Al Miles were trying to say here. Of course, it happens in real life. You have homes full of hate, where children are brought up with hate and tough love. And then you see parents giving their children nothing but love. And you see how they grow up as people, and you see how the others grow up as people. It's like seeing a child who's totally spoiled rotten, and then see a child who's brought up with nothing. We see that in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, and I think that's great. So, basically, also, when Lex falls to the ground before he becomes bald because of the meteors, there's a guy that's been strung up by a cross, and he asks for Lex's help, but he can't help him. So he's got an S painted on his chest. So what happens to this kid is the meteors have given him some kind of electrical power. So he's after the kids and the bullies. As I say, part of the commentary of the pilot episode of Smallville is bullying, which I think is great. So, not because it's bullying, but we see what it's like for these kids to be bullied, because Clark's bullied as well. But anyway, so this kid has now got abilities to escape from the hospital, and now he wants revenge. So what he's doing, he's going after his bullies one by one, not killing them, but giving them a little bit of an electric shock and putting them in hospital. But don't worry, Chloe Sullivan and Pete Ross are on the case, and they bring Clark in on it as well. So, this is the moment. So basically, these attacks happen, and Clark discovers that Chloe's got this wall of weird, where she's been cataloguing every strange event since the meteor shower, since the kryptonite meteor shower hit Smallville 12 years ago. By the way, the meteor shower thing, the meteor freaks was genius. Now, someone said to me on my live chat the other day, I didn't like the Freak of the Week. I didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like it. I loved it. And it was basically only for the first season. And it just gave Clark these mutants to fight and this mystery to unravel as well. So Clark discovers Chloe's wall of weird, where she's saying, look, this is why this kid's got powers. Anyway, Clark goes, why didn't you tell me about this? And she goes, we all have secrets, Clark. Do you tell me everything that happens in your life? And then he sees a Time magazine photo, front page, of Lana Lang as a child, crying as she sees her parents killed by the meteors. Clark says, my fault. So Clark has always blamed himself for this. Once he finds out what happened and he arrived on the same day as the meteors, we discuss that in a minute as Jonathan Kent reveals that to him. Anyway, so Clark's a bit depressed, and I'm telling you this stuff out of context, but don't worry about it. I'm having fun doing this, by the way, and I hope if you're a Smallville fan, or if you're kind of tempted to join Smallville and start watching the episodes alongside me, the first episode's called Pilot, and you should certainly do that. Anyway, so where was I? Yeah, so Clark's a bit depressed, hanging by the bridge. Lex Luthor's driving his sports car. We've already found out the scene before that he's been sent to Smallville by his father to run the Smallville plant. So anyway, he's driving, he picks his mobile up. They did have mobiles in 2001. They weren't smartphones though. Anyway, he drops it. He looks up and he's losing control. Clark's by the bridge. He hits Clark and crashes in the water. Clark goes after him, pulls him up, and starts giving him mouth-to-mouth, saying, please don't die on me. Imagine this. This is like Jesus giving Satan mouth-to-mouth, or Churchill giving Hitler mouth to mouth. This guy is going to become a really real big threat. But of course, Clark doesn't know who this guy is. He's just saving a life. This is Clark. This is what Superman's all about, right? Of course, in the future, Clark kind of starts to wonder, maybe it would have been better if he didn't save his life. But that's in the future. We'll talk about that in the future. So anyway, he saved his life, and Lex looks at him and says, I could have sworn I could have hit you. Boom. Their relationship summed up at once. Lex is suspicious. Lex is not dumb. He knows he's hit this kid. How is this kid saving his life? And then Clark goes, if you did, I'd be dead. Clark totally freaked out about what's happened. And so we go to the next scene where Jonathan turns up and says, who's the maniac who hit my son, who was driving that car? And Lex goes, it's me, Lex Luthor. And then maybe you should be careful how you drive. Oh, I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing again. And obviously, Jonathan doesn't like the Luthors. Now, there's a reason Jonathan doesn't like the Luthors. That would be revealed in a flashback in season 2. And when we get there, we'll discuss it. So anyway, a couple of scenes later, Clark gets home to find a brand new truck. And Martha tells him it's from Lex Luthor. The card, it has a gift card, and it says from the maniac in the Porsche. So anyway, Clark says to Martha, where are the keys? And she goes, very kind of depressingly says, your father has them. So Clark goes to Jonathan, his adopted father, and he says, where are the keys? And Jonathan says, I know how much you want it, son, but you can't keep it. Why not? I saved the guy's life. Jonathan goes, so you think that means you deserve a prize? This is exactly what I'm talking about. A real father saying to his son, you don't deserve a prize because you saved someone's life. This is what grooms him to become Superman. This is so important, this moment. And Clark becomes very, very frustrated. And Jonathan goes, I know you're upset, son, but it's normal. So Clark goes, what about this? Do you think this is normal? Now, he puts his hand in the machine that Jonathan's shredding hay in and puts his hand in, and nothing happens. Obviously, Jonathan shits himself and pulls it out. And then Clark goes, I wish I was normal. I'd give anything to be normal. As I explained before, teenagers want to be normal. It's so important. If you're not normal, you are on your own as a teenager at school. It's very difficult. So even as a preteen, I know, I've been there. Anyway, so he goes to the loft, the place where Jonathan calls it his fortress of solitude, obviously, for obvious reasons. And so it's time. So Jonathan goes up to him and says, it's time, son. And Clark says, time for what? The truth. So he pulls out this long thing with this Kryptonian stuff on it. He goes, we found this with you a long time ago when we found you. And he goes, and Clark says, well, what's it say? He goes, well, I've been trying to decipher it for years, but it's not in any language known to man. Now, this moment in the reveal of Clark's spaceship is very, very similar to how Snyder reveals Jonathan Kent in Snyder's Man of Steel, reveals who he is. So it's amazing how many things are ripped off from Smallville or inspired by Smallville, especially in Man of Steel, because Snyder used to watch Smallville with his kids. So it meant a great deal to him. Anyway, he says, and basically, I don't think your parents were around here, your biological parents were from around here, Clark. And Clark kind of looks sarcastically at Jonathan, and Clark goes, well, where are they from? And Jonathan looks in the sky. They do this really humorously, which I love. He goes, what are you trying to say, Dad? I'm from another planet. And Clark smiles. Don't tell me you put my spaceship in the loft. He goes, no, I put it in the cellar, meaning the storm cellar. So the next scene, Clark sees his spaceship. Clark's really freaked out and says, Dad, why didn't you tell me about this? We were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Clark runs off. So when we get this beautiful scene at a graveyard where Clark's there depressed on his own. By the way, I just want to go back to the scene after Clark saves Lex. They do this great thing where the paramedics have wrapped this red towel around him, and it looks like the Superman cape. Al and Miles were always doing great things like that, so it's just cool. Anyway, at the graveyard, Lana Lang turns up to see her dead parents. She talks to their graves, basically. And she's a bit startled. She can hear someone's there, but she doesn't know who. Who's there? It's me, Clark Kent. Now, Clark's standing by an angel with wings. Again, brilliant stuff from our Miles. Anyway, Clark goes, so what are you doing here? She goes, well, can I tell you a secret? And Clark goes, well, I'm the Fort Knox of secrets. And basically, she says, I talk to my parents. I bet you think I'm really weird, communing with the dead. So Clark's like really emotional. Goes, I don't think you're weird, Lana. Anyway, she talks to them, and then she kind of playfully says, well, my dad says, are you upset about a girl? And he goes, no, my mum says, are you upset about a girl? And then she goes, my dad is asking, are you upset about a guy? And Clark goes, no. Imagine that these days, Clark acting so defensively. She goes, well, my dad's got a twisted sense of humour. So that's supposed to be humour, but of course, nowadays, they would be destroyed for dialogue like this. But of course, 2001, we were in a different world. So they weren't trying to be horrible to gay people. It was just that's how we were back then. Unfortunately, we didn't know any better. And that's back in 2001, which is really bad, but that's the way people wrote back then. Anyway, they start talking. It's really cool. And they break the ice. And then she walks Clark home because they live next door to each other. And she goes, do you realise this is the longest conversation we've ever had? And he goes, are you going to the dance? And she goes, yeah, with Whitney, which is her boyfriend. Then Clark feels a bit down. She goes, are you going? He goes, no, I'm going to sit this year's one out. And so there's a dance going on. And then we have this brilliant scene at the Luther Mansion. So Clark turns up at the Luther Mansion. There's no one about. It all looks a bit weird. It's like someone's just moved in. Obviously, Lex has. So Clark sees Lex and this other person fencing. And so Lex loses the fencing match, gets angry and throws the sword at the wall. It strikes the wall and nearly strikes Clark. And Lex goes, Clark, how did you get in? He goes, well, I just fitted through the bars. And Lex is obviously confused. And he goes, Clark goes, if this is a bad time. So anyway, they start talking. And Clark goes, oh, this is a nice place. He goes, yeah, if you're dead and if you're in the market for something to haunt. I've always loved that. He goes, no, it's roomy. And obviously, he goes, yeah, my dad moved it from Scotland brick by brick. And Clark's kind of taken aback. He goes, oh, why didn't your dad move in? He goes, oh, my dad had no intention of moving in. So why did he move it? Because he could. That's who Lionel Luther is. This is how the rich are. He just brought the castle to Smallville because he could. No. Now, that's not actually true. Now, Lex doesn't know the real reason why Lionel Luther brought this Scottish castle to Smallville, stone by stone. There's a secret about Clark hidden somewhere in this mansion. This won't be revealed till season 7. So great. So a few spoilers if you're new to Smallville. So anyway, they have this conversation, and basically Clark says, I'm here to give you back the keys of the car. I can't keep them. I saved your life, Clark. It's the least I can do. Your father doesn't like me, does he? It's not you. It's your father. He thinks the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Understandable. Then he goes, it's okay, Clark. I've been bald since I was 9. People always have a bad first impression of me. So anyway, Clark says, thanks for the truck, puts the keys down, walks out. And then Lex goes, do you believe a man can fly? And Clark goes, people can't fly, Lex. Brilliant. Brilliant. Because Clark will fly one day. Do you get it? It's amazing. Of course you get it. You're not stupid. And then Lex goes, well, I died when my heart stopped after the accident. He goes, I flew over Smallville. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Or, again, I'm paraphrasing. And obviously, Lex feels trapped. He's had a horrible childhood. And we'll find out in later seasons and episodes that his mother died of cancer. And he also lost a baby brother called Julian. We'll find this stuff out as the season progresses and the series progresses. So Lex has had a really tormented life. And then he tells Clark, listen, Clark, we have a future, Clark, and I don't want anything to get in the way of our friendship. So they just look at each other and then the scene finishes. It's a powerful moment. These guys are going to be enemies one day, but our Miles setting them up as friends, even when I first saw this, was such a powerful thing. The way they wrote it, the conversation. Our Miles could have written Lex Luthor as this flash young guy, bedding women, driving sports cars, being a bit spoilt, but they made him intelligent. and someone that Clark can converse with and have a friendship with. And I think to this day that that was genius. And so what happens is Whitney, Alana's boyfriend, gets Clark and ties him up and makes him this year's Scarecrow, writes the S on his shield, and he puts Lana's kryptonite necklace on him. So he's weak. He can't escape from the cross. So he's on the cross like Jesus, basically. So obviously there's that piece of commentary there as well. Anyway, this guy finds him, who was also the Scarecrow 12 years ago, and Clark says, free me. He goes, no. He goes, you're better off here. I'm doing this for us and people like us. In other words, people who are bullied. Basically, as I say, the commentary to this episode is about people being bullied. So, anyway, I forgot his name, but he goes to the school. Lex finds Clark, frees him. Clark runs off, but Lex finds that the kryptonite necklace has fallen off of Clark's neck. He picks it up and he looks at it. This is an iconic moment, Lex Luthor looking at kryptonite, because in the future, he'll be using kryptonite all the time, as we know. So anyway, Clark tries to stop the kid with the superpowers now. Clark says, don't do this. He goes, yeah, I'm doing this. Again, he says, I'm doing this for us and people like us. And Clark goes, those kids didn't do anything to you. Anyway, they have a fight. They have a superhero kind of supervillain fight. Doesn't last long. Anyway, the kid goes in the car. He gets an electric shock because the fire hydrant explodes and the water's going in. And then he loses his memories. And Clark wakes him up and says, who am I? Clark goes, who are you? No, he goes to Clark, who are you? He goes, I'm Clark Kent. And this is Smallville. And the kid goes, I want to go home. And that's that. So it's very simplistic, but it just displays that these meteors can give humans powers, which hasn't been done in any iteration of Superman ever. It was a neat idea as far as I'm concerned. And of course, it was very X-Files-y. This is what Smallville seemed like at first, because you had Clark, Chloe and Pete investigating the meteors and people infected by the meteors, and because Mark Snow, the guy who did the music, composed the music for the X-Files, also was doing Smallville in the first 5 or 6 seasons, 5 seasons, I think. It was very X-Files-y, which I loved about the show as well. So very creative. So anyway, Clark goes back to his little Fortress of Solitude. It's not the real Fortress of Solitude. It's just the barn, and basically Jonathan's calling it that. It's not actually the fortress. Anyway, he has this fantasy that Lana turns up and says, I didn't see you tonight, Lana. And she looks up, she goes, I saved you a dance. But this is what she actually tells him after the graveyard as well. So it's a sweet moment where they have this dance. He looks up, though, and it's a fantasy. How many young men have fantasies about dancing with their crushes at school? I mean, I know I did. Her name was Hannah. And I mean, she was the most beautiful girl at school, and I couldn't get near her. And she was going out with David O'Brien, the cool kid, Whitney Fordman, basically, yeah? So anyway, he looks out on his telescope, because he's always spying on her with the telescope. Now, I know it's a bit creepy, but I'm sure a few young men and young women have spied on the people their crushes on. Not me, before you start. So these days, it would be misconstrued, unfortunately. We live in that kind of toxic environment. But it was pretty cool. Anyway, so she's waving goodbye. She's been dropped off. And then she looks over to the barn, looks a bit suspicious, and then she goes home. And then the final scene is really touching. Jonathan comes into him and says, are you okay? And Clark says, ask me in 5 years. And this is a devastating moment, because we don't know it when we're first watching this, but in 5 years' time, Jonathan will be dead. Wow. So anyway, Jonathan goes down, leaves the loft, leaves the barn, and then Clark catches up with him and says, you know what, Dad? I'm glad it was you and Mum who found me. And Jonathan says the line that Martha uses when they first find him. Oh, no, son, we didn't find you. You found us. Beautiful. And then it just finishes with this beautiful song. I forgot what the song's called, but it's a classic. And that's the end of episode 1 of Smallville, titled Pilot, directed by David Nutter and written by Alfred Goff and Alfred Goff and Miles Miller. Yeah, that's it. Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, the people who created the show. This was just the beginning of a decade of a journey, a beautiful journey. This pilot episode is perfect. I just finished watching it about, 35 minutes ago. I didn't realise this review was going to take so long. but it's just a beautiful experience, and I think this is going to be a very emotional journey for me because I love this show. This is one of my favourite live action iterations for DC, but especially Superman, because Superman's my character, as I keep on boring you lot about all the time. This is a beautiful pilot. It does everything. It sets everything up. It sets the friendship between Clark and Lex up. We know they're going to become enemies, but on this show, we don't know how it's going to happen, and it's beautiful. The relationship between his parents and his friends, Chloe and Pete, and his relationship, with Lana. He's infatuated with her. It's a beautiful pilot that's barely about 40 minutes long, but it does everything it needs to do. Anyway, fellow Smallville fans, new Smallville fans, did you enjoy the review? Do you love Smallville? Did you enjoy the pilot? Let me know in the comments below. I will be back later on with the Movies TV Mad live around 6:30 p.m. UK time. Check your local times so you don't miss a thing. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss this. And I'll see you tonight for the live stream. Until then, goodbye.